Hi, my name is Nancy. I wish I could tell you that my family has always been warm, supportive, and loving, that the kind of family you'd expect to gather around a big table during the holidays, laughing and sharing stories. But the truth? My family was never really like that, at least not for me. It happened just a week before Christmas. My parents invited me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in downtown Milwaukee, the kind of place they liked to visit when they wanted to feel fancy without spending too much. The walls were covered in fake brick wallpaper, and the tables had little battery-powered candles that flickered in a poor imitation of warmth. I didn't expect much from the night, but I brought them a gift anyway. That's what I always did. I'd spent hours picking it out. A set of hand-painted ornaments with their initials, wrapped neatly with a gold ribbon. It wasn't expensive, but it was thoughtful. Thoughtful was always my way of showing love, since love in my family never really came back in words. When I arrived, my mother was already sitting at the table, tapping her nails against a glass of water. My father sat across from her, flipping through the menu even though he always ordered the same thing, lasagna extra cheese. And next to him was my younger sister, Emily. Emily had her phone out, as usual, scrolling with a smirk on her face like she was too busy for the rest of us. She was the golden child. Always had been. The one who could do no wrong, no matter how many times she messed up. Dropped out of college? That was finding herself? Spent money she didn't have? That was just a phase. But me? If I so much as asked a question, I was labeled difficult. I took my seat, smiled politely, and slid the small gift across the table to my mom. She looked at it for half a second, forced a tight smile, and said, "Oh, you shouldn't have." Then she placed it beside her plate as though it were a flyer handed to her in a parking lot. She didn't even open it. I should have known right then that the evening wasn't going to end well. We ordered our food, and for a while, the only sounds were the clinking of silverware and the muffled Christmas music playing from the speakers overhead. Bing Crosby was crooning about a white Christmas, but the air at that table felt anything but merry. Finally, my mother cleared her throat, the way she always did when she had something unpleasant to deliver. "We've been meaning to tell you something," she said. I froze. Those words never led anywhere good. She looked at me, her eyes cold but steady. "You don't need to come for Christmas this year." At first, I thought I misheard. "I don't need to come?" I repeated, my voice soft. My mother nodded. "Yes, Emily will be there, and that's enough." I felt my stomach drop, as though the floor had been pulled from under me. My sister smirked at her phone, clearly enjoying the moment. My father didn't look at me. He just kept staring at his plate. I thought of all the things I'd done for them. Paying off their overdue utility bills when the lights were about to be cut, covering their car payments when Dad lost his job, even helping Emily with her credit card debt after one of her phases went too far, and, most importantly, paying the mortgage on the very house they lived in now. Without me, they wouldn't have had that house. Without me, they would have been drowning in debt. But apparently, I wasn't worth a seat at the Christmas table. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "So, Emily is enough?" I asked. My mother gave a small shrug as if it were obvious. "Christmas will be smaller this year. More intimate, you understand, right?" I nodded slowly, though it felt like a blade twisting in my chest. Emily finally looked up from her phone, her smirk widening. "It's not personal, Nancy." Don't make it a thing, I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them how they could do this to me after everything I'd given up for them. But instead, I just pushed back my chair, smoothed my coat, and stood. "Oh, it's not a thing," I said, my voice calm in a way that made my mother glance at me for the first time all evening. "It's exactly what it needs to be." I left cash for my coffee on the table and walked out into the cold December night. The air outside was sharp, biting against my cheeks, but it felt clearer than the air in that restaurant. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone. Scrolling through my banking app, I found the recurring payment labeled Lakeview Mortgage Services. My thumb hovered for just a second before I tapped cancel. Just like that, the lifeline they depended on was gone. I slipped my phone back into my purse and whispered to myself, let's see how cozy Christmas feels when the bank comes calling. The days after that were quiet, at least for me. At first I wondered if they'd even notice. Maybe they'd assume there was a glitch. Maybe they'd think I'd fix it. But on Monday morning, the call came. Not from my parents, but from the mortgage company. "Miss Clark," the voice said, "we noticed your recent payment didn't process for the property at Lakeview Drive." I leaned back in my chair, cradling my coffee. "That's because I stopped making it." The man on the other end stammered, I'm sorry, did you say you've stopped paying?" "That's right," I said, calm. "I'm no longer financially responsible for that property." He cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, without your contributions, the property is at risk of default. Are you aware of that?" I almost laughed. Very aware. There was silence, and then he asked if I wanted to leave a reason for discontinuation. I told him he could note, "I'm done being taken advantage of." And that was that. Later that afternoon, the real storm hit. My mother called, her voice shaking with panic. "Nancy, the mortgage didn't go through." "Was there some mistake?" "No mistake," I replied. "I stopped paying." Her gasp crackled through the phone. "You what? Why would you do that?" "Because it's not my responsibility anymore," I said evenly. "You wanted Emily for Christmas. Consider this an early gift. Now you can figure it out together." There was silence. Then a click. She hung up without another word. I stared at the phone in my hand, my chest hollow. There was no satisfaction yet, just an ache from realizing how easy it had been for them to reduce me to nothing more than a bank account. I'd spent years sacrificing my savings, my peace of mind, my energy, believing that if I just gave enough, they would finally see me, finally love me. But love doesn't come with receipts. I whispered to myself, why did I ever think money would buy me a place at their table? And for the first time in my life, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, walking away was the only way to finally set myself free. It didn't take long for the silence to break. The morning after my mother hung up on me, my phone lit up again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Emily. I knew exactly how this was going to go. Emily never called unless she needed something, or unless she was furious. And judging from the timing, it wasn't hard to guess which one it was. I stared at the phone as it buzzed across my kitchen counter. I thought about ignoring it, but then curiosity got the better of me. I swiped to answer. The moment the line connected, her voice came through like a knife. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Nancy?" Her words were so sharp I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Good morning to you too, Emily," I said dryly. "Don't play cute," she snapped. "Mom hasn't stopped crying." Dad is furious. And do you realize what this means for all of us? That house represents our family, our image. You've jeopardized everything. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. Funny, I don't remember living there. All I remember is paying for it. Emily scoffed so loudly I could picture her rolling her eyes. "You're so ungrateful. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them? Right before Christmas?" I almost laughed. "Everything? You mean the endless bills I covered? The mortgage, the credit cards? Or maybe you mean your rent, Emily, the one I paid when you couldn't keep a job? Or should we talk about your wedding?" There was a pause, then her voice turned syrupy, fake sweet. "This is exactly what I mean. You always make everything about you. Well, you can't stand that Mom and Dad appreciate me. You've always been jealous. You ruin everything." Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. "You know what really ruins everything, Emily? Pretending I don't exist unless you need me to open my wallet." She let out a harsh laugh. "Please, no one asked you to play martyr. You chose this." Her tone dripped with contempt, and for a moment the old familiar sting crept back in, the one I'd carried for years whenever she twisted my sacrifices into flaws. But instead of swallowing it like I used to, my mind drifted back to her wedding. It had been 3 years ago, a massive, extravagant affair in Chicago. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, tables draped in silk, Emily's dream day, and I had paid for nearly half of it, quietly, because Mom told me she deserved it. That night, I sat at a back table, my name card reading simply, Nancy Clark. No mention of being the sister of the bride, no toast, no thanks, not even a seat near the family. When Emily raised her glass that evening, she smiled at Mom and Dad. "Thank you for making this day possible." The room erupted in applause. Nobody even looked at me. Later, when she introduced me to one of her friends, she laughed lightly and said, "Oh, this is my sister. She's just been helping out, as if I hadn't been the financial backbone of the whole event." I remembered telling myself silence was dignity, but now, with her voice dripping contempt into my ear, I realized silence was just erasure. I gripped the phone tighter. "Are you finished?" I asked evenly. She huffed. "You've always been expendable, Nancy. Don't make us prove it." And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone long after the call ended, her words echoing in my head. Expendable. They'd been treating me like I was disposable for years, but hearing her say it out loud carved it into something permanent. I put the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, Christmas lights blinked on porches up and down the street. Families were decorating trees, sipping cocoa, planning gatherings. And me? I was standing alone, realizing my own family had finally admitted the truth I'd been trying to deny my whole life. 2 days later, I found myself driving to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to go, but the silence after Emily's call gnawed at me, like a loose thread I couldn't stop pulling. If they wanted to speak their truth, they could say it to my face. The house looked as pristine as ever when I pulled up. Wreaths on the door, glowing lights in the windows, all the things that made it look like a picture-perfect home. But I knew better. The front door was unlocked, of course. They never imagined anyone would dare cross their threshold uninvited. Inside, the air smelled of citrus cleaner and expensive candles. Mom and Dad were sitting stiffly on the white leather couch, posture too straight, like they'd been rehearsing this confrontation. And on the coffee table, Emily's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "You've embarrassed us," my mother said before I could even sit. I dropped my purse on the armchair, leaning against it casually. Embarrassed who? The family? Or just Emily? My father's face turned red, his voice sharp. "She appreciates us." "You don't. You think paying for things makes you important. It doesn't buy you love." There it was. The sentence that unraveled years of swallowed pain. "Funny," I said slowly, because it sure made me convenient. Paying for your debts, your mortgage, Emily's wedding, that didn't make me important? Interesting. Mom sniffed like she was the one wronged. "You're twisting things." The house. It wasn't about us. It was about keeping the family together, about keeping Emily happy when she visits. My father added coldly, "We only kept the house because it makes Emily happy. You've never factored in our decisions." The words landed like a gavel. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face steady. Finally, the truth spoken out loud. I was never part of their plans. I was just the wallet. I took a deep breath. "Thank you," I said. Mom frowned. "For what?" "For confirming what I've always known." My father rolled his eyes. "There you go again. Always dramatic. Always the victim. We've done everything we could for you, but you've always been difficult. Not like your sister difficult. Their favorite word for me since childhood. I was difficult when I asked questions. Difficult when I worked 2 jobs instead of asking them for help. Difficult whenever I expected respect. I looked around the living room, The house I'd been paying for. It looked perfect on the surface, but it was cold, lifeless, like a showroom pretending to be a home. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said softly. "This is who you are. Who you've always been." Mom crossed her arms. "If you came here expecting an apology, you won't get one. You've ruined Christmas. Is that what you wanted? To punish us?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I came here to see if there was anything worth saving." I picked up my purse and stood. My hand lingered on the doorframe as I turned back one last time. "You've made yourselves very clear. Merry Christmas. Enjoy the house while you can." And then I walked out, leaving their silence behind me. When I walked out of my parents' house that night, the cold December air hit me like a wave. My breath turned white in front of me, but inside, I wasn't trembling anymore. For the first time in years, my hands were steady. I drove home in silence. No radio, no distractions. Just the hum of the car and the words echoing in my head, "You've never factored into our decisions." That sentence hurt, but it also cleared something in me. If I'd never factored into their decisions, why had I let them control mine for so long? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a pile of mortgage statements spread in front of me. Each paper was like a reminder of the years I'd been carrying their burden. My name was on every single page, mine, not theirs, not Emily's. I whispered to myself, "No more." At 8 a.m. sharp, I called the mortgage company. "This is Nancy Clark," I said calmly. "I'd like to freeze all payments effective immediately." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Ma'am, do you understand this will place the account in default if payments are not resumed?" "I do," I said firmly. "That's the point." There was a pause. Then she replied, "Understood." "I'll process that for you." Now when I hung up, I expected guilt, regret, fear. But instead, I felt clarity. It wasn't anger anymore. It was control. That same day, I scheduled a consultation with a property lawyer I'd worked with years ago. His name was Mr. Harris, a sharp man with kind eyes who'd helped me when I first took over the mortgage. When his face appeared on my laptop screen, he smiled in recognition. "Nancy Clark. I remember you. What's going on?" I explained everything, the payments, the sacrifices, the confrontation. He listened quietly, nodding. Finally, he leaned forward. "Nancy, let me remind you, this property is in your name alone. Legally, your parents are just occupants. You hold all the rights here." The words landed like a key turning in a lock. "So if I want to stop supporting them," I asked. "Then you can," he said simply. "You can sell the house, evict them, or keep it empty if you want. They have no legal claim over it." For the first time in years, I smiled, not the polite smile I wore at family dinners, a real smile. "That's exactly what I needed to hear," I said. After the call, I drafted an email addressed to all three of them, Mom, Dad, and Emily. "Please ensure all personal belongings are stored properly. Changes to the property's status may be forthcoming. No explanation, no apology, just a polite, vague warning, the kind of message that makes people sweat." I hit send, then closed my laptop. My phone buzzed within minutes. First Mom, then Emily, then Dad. Call after call after call. I didn't answer. Not this time. By evening, the texts had started. "We need to talk, but don't do this. You're tearing the family apart." I set the phone down and let it buzz. Their panic no longer controlled me. 2 nights later, there was a knock at my door. Heavy, insistent, the kind that rattles through your chest before you even move to answer it. I looked through the peephole and saw her. My mother, standing on the porch with her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. Behind her, I saw headlights. My gut told me Emily wasn't far behind. I opened the door, leaning casually against the frame. "Evening?" I said. Mom stepped inside without asking. "What is this stunt, Nancy? Freezing the mortgage? Do you know how humiliated we are? What will people think when they find out we can't even pay our bills? There it was. Not fear of losing their home, fear of appearances. I stayed silent, letting her pace the room, letting her spit out every accusation she could muster. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettled her more than any outburst. Finally, she spun on her heel. "You've embarrassed us." "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I tilted my head. "Everything you've done for me?" "Like what?" Before she could answer, I heard it, the sharp click of heels on concrete. Emily. Moments later, she walked in without knocking, her perfume filling the room before her words did. "You've gone too far this time, Nancy. If you don't fix this, you're out for good. Don't think Mom and Dad will protect you this time." I couldn't help it. I laughed quietly. "That's interesting. You only show up when your comfort is threatened. Where was this energy when I was paying your tuition? Covering your wedding costs? Keeping the house afloat so you could play hostess at Christmas?" Emily's smirk faltered for a moment before she snapped back. "You've always been dramatic. This is exactly why Mom didn't want you at Christmas. You ruin everything." I met her glare steadily. "I can take things away because I paid for them." And I did. My mother stepped closer, her face tight. "If you don't want to be part of this family anymore, then sign over the house. Make it official. Otherwise, you'll regret this." There it was, the real threat. I stepped forward until we were inches apart. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like glass. "You don't get to threaten me in my own home. You don't get to dictate my choices. Not anymore." For the first time, I saw it. Fear. A flicker. Buried deep, but real. "Leave," I said. Emily smirked thinly, leaning in close enough that her whisper brushed against my cheek. "This isn't over. You're about to lose everything." I didn't blink. "We'll see." The next morning, I met Mr. Harris again, this time in his office downtown. The walls were lined with books and the faint smell of leather and coffee filled the room. Across the table sat my parents, Emily, and two lawyers I vaguely recognized from family gatherings. Emily sat at the head like some self-appointed queen, tapping a sleek folder against the table. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice syrupy but sharp. "We thought it best to settle this privately." I raised an eyebrow. "Privately?" "Interesting, considering how public you're willing to make everything else." She slid the folder toward me. "You signed this last year. It's a gift transfer. The house to Mom and Dad. We just need you to formalize it." I opened it. My name was there. My signature, too. But it wasn't my hand. I let my chest tighten, just enough for them to think they had me. Emily leaned back, satisfied. "You wouldn't want this to go to court, would you?" Mom chimed in, her voice rehearsed. "Don't make this ugly, Nancy. Just sign it. Let's end this gracefully graceful," their favorite word. Graceful meant silent. Graceful meant swallowed pride. Graceful meant losing again. I leaned back, folded my hands, and took a slow breath. "You know," I said softly, "it's interesting how quickly you can fabricate my generosity." Emily tilted her head, confused. "What does that mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. "It means you should have remembered who bought that house. Whose name is on every payment? Who's been keeping records?" I spread the documents across the table. Notarized mortgage papers, bank transfers, emails, every dime, every temporary loan they called a gift, every time they used my accounts without permission. Emily's smirk evaporated. Mom's face drained of color. Even the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. I looked at them all. This isn't just about a house. If this goes public, you don't just lose property. You lose everything, your reputation, your lies, the image you've built, all of it. Silence fell, heavy. Mom tried first. "You wouldn't I?" I cut her off. Emily stared at me like I'd just rewritten the rules of the game she thought she owned. I stood, gathering my folder. The mortgage is done. My support is done. And you, I looked at each of them in turn. You're done using me. No one spoke, and for the first time in my life, I walked away with the upper hand. Christmas morning arrived quietly. For the first time in years, there were no buzzing group texts demanding my presence, no passive-aggressive reminders about what time to show up, no calendar invites for a family dinner I was expected to bankroll. The sun crept gently through the blinds of my townhouse, casting soft golden light across the living room. My small tree stood in the corner, simple, decorated with a few old ornaments and a string of warm lights I'd had for years. It wasn't much, not compared to the towering, glittering showpiece in my parents' house, but it was mine. Every inch of it was mine. I shuffled into the kitchen in my slippers, poured myself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter, listening to the silence. At first, the quiet felt strange. For so long, I had been conditioned to expect chaos. My mother's sighs that could fill an entire room, Emily's biting remarks, my father's stony silence. But now, none of that lingered. Just peace. I sat on the couch, pulled a blanket around my shoulders, and let the stillness sink in. It felt almost foreign, like learning to breathe again. Halfway through my coffee, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an old family friend. The subject line made my stomach twist. Thought you should see this. Attached was a link to an article. The headline read, "Local couple under investigation for financial misrepresentation." I scrolled through slowly. My parents' names were right there, bold and unavoidable. Emily's name, too, mentioned as an advisor. The story detailed improper transfers, falsified documents, property disputes. Their perfect little image, the charitable couple, the respectable family, was crumbling piece by piece. I didn't feel joy. Not really. I didn't feel vindication either, not in the way I once imagined. What I felt was calm, a strange, heavy calm. They did this to themselves, I whispered into the quiet, and I believed it. For the first time, I truly believed it. I set the phone down and turned to the small box sitting on the coffee table. It had been there since that disastrous dinner at the restaurant, tucked away like a wound I hadn't wanted to touch. Slowly, I opened it. Inside was the gift I had given my mother, the hand-painted ornaments with their initials, wrapped neatly with a ribbon. She hadn't even bothered to open it that night. I lifted one ornament from the box, a snowflake painted in soft silver and white. I traced the grooves with my finger, remembering how invisible I had felt when she pushed it aside like junk mail. But now, holding it, I realized it didn't have to mean rejection. It could mean something else, something for me. I stood, walked to the tree, and hung the ornament on a low branch where I could see it from the couch. It swayed gently, catching the light. It no longer belonged to them. It wasn't about their approval or their shifting expectations. It was mine. I sank back onto the couch and let my gaze rest on the ornament. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure. The phone rang again. This time it was the bank, confirming finalization of the property transfer. The house was officially under my sole control. No third-party claims. No loopholes left for them to exploit. I let out a long breath, steady and sure. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. It wasn't just about a house. It was about severing the last tie they had over me, about reclaiming myself. I sat in that quiet living room, coffee still warm in my hands, staring at the small tree, and I thought about everything I once believed. I used to think Christmas was about being with family, no matter the cost. That's what kept me chained to them, year after year, holiday after holiday, believing that sacrifice was the ticket to belonging. But I finally understood. Christmas, real Christmas, wasn't about keeping a seat at a table where you were never welcome. It was about knowing who truly belongs at your table. And this year, that was just me. I smiled softly, the ornament glinting back at me like a quiet affirmation. "Merry Christmas, Nancy," I whispered. For once, the words didn't feel empty. They felt like freedom. Nancy's story reminds us that family isn't measured by money or sacrifice, but by love and respect. She learned the hard way that giving endlessly doesn't guarantee belonging, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away. This Christmas, she found peace, not in a crowded house, but in her own quiet freedom. If you've ever felt overlooked, remember, your worth is not defined by others. If this story touched you, share it, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts below. Nancy's story reminds us that family is not measured by money or sacrifice, but by love and respect. She learned in the hardest way that giving endlessly doesn't guarantee belonging, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. This Christmas, Nancy found peace not in a crowded house, but in her own quiet freedom. If you've ever felt overlooked, remember, your worth is not defined by others. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, your love, your truth, your place are always worth defending.